Episode 3. Okay, I have to say this. Hollow movies. That is a thing in this universe, and that is freaking epic. You know, like when you're like sitting in the midst of the movie. My family and I, we talked about that. I remember that joking about when we were younger, talking about how cool that would be just to like have movies and be able to like the whole room is the movie and you're just like in the midst of the movie. Like how cool would that be? Can we like make that an actual thing? Like, that would be super cool. But back to the episode. It starts out with him watching Hollow movies, so that was kind of where that little commentary came from. But older Bennett comes back because he's devastated because he knows it's right about now where he gets a dog and it breaks his heart because apparently the dog ran away and like he never recovered and it was super traumatic. That should be laughing because that does happen and does traumatize kids sometimes, but you get what it is. Like he's traumatized, so he's like, hey, don't get a dog. And of course Bennett wants to get a dog because Penelope, which is his arch nemesis basically, her dad owns the building, and Snodgrass Industries, if you remember from earlier me going over it, Snodgrass Industries basically the go against of the Super Soldier and the industries that does the Super Soldier, which is like a government NASA agency or whatever. So it's Snodgrass goes against the government or NASA or whatever. But his daughter is Bennett's arch nemesis, which is kind of cute because it's like B plot coming into play again, because it's like you got these major opponents and then you got like this mild version of the opponents. But she has a cat and is harassing him like, hey, you can't get a dog or you can't get a pet because blah blah blah, being a bully. She's being a little meanie. So that convinces him to get a dog because, you know, when you have childhood bullies making fun of you, it makes sense to just bring in a pet to like show them off. But you know, kids are kids, so whatever. But his major convincing for his father is the mom is a bad cook, which does come into play later, so I'll comment on that. But yes, mom is a bad cook. That is important for this episode. And then it's like, hey dad, you know, if we had a dog, we wouldn't have to eat this. Like we could just give it to the dog and mom would not be the wiser. So dad's like, yeah, sure, let's get a dog then. So he gets the dog. The dog's name is Duke, and to keep the dog from running away, because of course older Bennett realizes, hey, this kid's not gonna like listen to me and don't want him to be traumatized because he's traumatized and I'm traumatized, so let's try to figure this out. So they come up with a way that like, hey, dog's not going to run away if we make it smart. Now that's not going to backfire. It totally does. It totally backfires because the dog ends up becoming smart, and not just smart, he ends up accidentally using, or when he's using the device to make the dog smart, he gets off whatever. So the dog's just sitting trying to become smart and accidentally stumbles upon a Hollow movie that involves mob bosses. So instead of the dog becoming smart, the dog becomes smart and a mob boss. So yeah, that's pretty epic and pretty terrifying all in one thing, which is hilarious. And like I said, was going to tie back into it, mom's bad cooking leads to mom making muffins that are like super rock hard, and the dog's like, hey, I like these are good, because you know the dog likes to work for it. So the dog takes the mom's muffin recipe and turns it into an underground dog biscuit trading, or whatever that is called, instead of the usual cartel substances being used, it's dog biscuits instead. So it's like a kid friendly version, whatever. But the dog ends up tangling Bennett in the operation, and that of course petrifies him. Like he's like, okay, we gotta figure something out because I don't want to go to jail, and if I go to jail that means you go to jail, older Bennett. And then like that's a funny mess. So they find out, not only on top of that the dog's starting and doing his own mob boss industries and whatnot, the feds are onto them. And so he's like, oh, this is a bigger mess than I want it to be. We gotta figure some way out of this. So to try to figure out the whole situation and like figure out what they can do, they end up following Duke into this meeting, and it turns out that in the meeting, I won't ruin who it's against because that's pretty funny. That's you need to watch it. But Duke has a meeting, and then a whole immense thing goes down, and at the end of it, Duke is fine, Bennett's fine, everyone turns out fine, and it turns out that Duke made a deal with the feds. So in the end, they made the dog smart to keep the dog from running away and breaking Bennett's heart. But in return, the dog turned smart, still ran away because the feds needed him, and that was the only way he was gonna keep his freedom and not go to jail for having a dog biscuit cartel. He still runs away, but you know, he was a mob boss. And the attachment that Bennett had previously, timeline-wise, to the dog is not the same anymore. Because, you know, when your dog becomes a mob boss and entangles you in his mess, then, you know, leaving isn't the worst thing that he can do. That whole thing's a mess. On to episode 4. Bennett, in this episode, he's trying to make up with his friends. He's trying to make up with his friends. because apparently after this incident that they went to a game show, they're he's friends with some other super smart kids, and he ends up being like a real meanie bobini and ends up answering all of the questions without considering them. Like he's in a group, but he's doing all the work gladly and just shoving them to the side. And so of course there's hurt feelings, and so that ends up spoiling. And so old Bennett comes back and is like, hey, let's figure out what's wrong. And he's like, do you not know what's wrong? And you're in from the future, do you know what's wrong with them? And he's like, no, I never figured it out. But apparently after that point on, Bennett didn't have any friends, period. So like, this is important to try to fix, because old dude doesn't want to be alone anymore, and it's kind of sad. And when they show the future version of himself being all alone, and it's super sad, like you get all the feels for him. So you're like, yeah, I want him to become a better person, because I don't want him to become all lonely. But to try to make situation better, he ends up making an apology gift, and he was like, you know what, each of my friends like one thing, so let's combine them all. So let's make a snow cone country music playing magic robot called Mr. Sorry. And you guessed it, it backfires, because of course it has to, because that's the plot of every episode, which makes sense, because it's a kid's show. It's good, like as far as in like it makes sense. There's always going to be shows that play the same thing over, but do it differently. This one actually has a whole bunch of questions. Like I have a whole bunch written down in the script for this episode, because there's a lot in this one. It backfires, so they have to stop the robot from bringing a huge blizzard coming to town, because the robot itself needs to stay cold and it's malfunctioning. I wouldn't say malfunctioning. It's becoming bad, of course, because that's where the episode's taking it. It needs to stay cold for the snow cones, and it hacks in. This is what gets me. It hacks into a satellite that controls the weather, and that's how the huge blizzard is coming about, because it hacks into a satellite that controls the weather, and that in itself is terrifying. Like, is that a legit thing, or is that just an in-universe thing? Like, what? Okay, so we'll come back to that, because there's some other stuff. But B-plot is Sophie and Liam trying to keep their parents together and keep them from getting divorced, because apparently it's their anniversary and both of them forgot because they're busy, and sometimes stuff like that happens. So the kids are terrified, which is funny when you watch that slowly go down, because they're freaking out over nothing, because the parents are like, yeah, we still love each other, we're just busy, and it's just one of those times. So the kids are running around trying to keep them from getting divorced when that's not even a thing. And then this one actually has 3 different plots, because it's got the kids' secondary plot with Sophie and Liam, the main plot, and then the C plot is the super soldier. This is when the super soldier comes into play more so. Like, you see the super soldier a couple times in the other episodes, but this one's more so, like, directly more so. Because it's trying to stop Mr. Sorry from hacking into the satellites, which apparently, I can't remember if it says it in the episode or not, or who owns the satellite, but if I'm not mistaken, I think they own it, like the government NASA agency owns the satellite, which is terrifying, that they just have this thing that can control the weather just like whenever they want, like just a snap of their fingers, especially even more so for just a robot to be able to hack in. Like this is insane. This is not a real thing, right? Like, we don't have things that can control the weather. And if we do, that is slightly terrifying, because I've never heard of. I mean, is that a thing? Is that a thing? Can we control the weather that easily? But the fact of, through the whole show, I've only had one character that I pinned that questioned it at all. Like, everyone else is like, yeah, we need to like bunker down, this hurricane's coming. And then one character, Mira, her name's Mira, and she's hilarious. Like, her jabs at Bennett and just into like she's sass 2.0, and it's hilarious. She's like, Sophie and Eddie are my favorite, and then she's like right barely below them. Like, it's funny. She's funny, but she's the only one that's like, hey, why is there a snowstorm? Isn't it like, I can't remember. She says, I think she says that it's like summertime, or not summertime, but she's like, hey, it's not supposed to be snowing, so why is it snowing? And then everyone just brushes past it, like, hey, no, like, it's normal enough, it's fine, which means that this is a common enough occurrence that only one character questions it, which means that this has to be an in-universe thing. Like, this has to be an in-universe normal thing, right? I'm sorry, I'm yabbering on. Okay, back to the story. Even Bennett questions how Mr. Sorry is controlling the weather, But the extent of that only goes to, hey, my robot that I designed shouldn't be able to control the weather. Oh, he's controlling it by hacking into a satellite or some other thing that's controlling the weather. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We don't have to worry about that. Let's just tackle the Mr. Sorry thing. And he never comes back to it, which in itself proves that this has got to be in universe logic, right? I feel like I'm thinking way too much into the show. I don't know. It's cool and like scary and like not scary, but whatever. Back to the thing. So he's trying to conquer Mr. Sorry and try to like keep him from like destroy, like not destroy. I don't know. He's trying to keep this blizzard from happening. So yeah. But he ends up teaming it with Mira, and their back and forth is hilarious. Like, she does not let it hold back when it comes to Bennett. Like, she is popping off. But they end up fixing things as usual, and they end up coming home safe. Everything's like a happy ending. Even the parents come home, and Sophie and Liam set up like a little date thing for them, and it was cute. And then the parents are like, no, it's fine, like life happens sometimes, but I still love your father. I still have, like, they shared like their love for each other. Like, it hasn't died. It's still like booming, and it's sweet. And it's like, yeah, like that's definitely a marriage that is like you should be shooting for. Like that's definitely a good relationship to like pin yourself to. Okay, episode 4 is down.